Hey guys, so, ooh, that sounded bad. I just wanted to talk to you about the symptoms that I had from COVID, in case you guys were curious. For those of you who don't know, on April 20th, I tested positive for COVID. I am still testing positive for COVID. The health department said that I could test positive for like 90 days after actually being infected with COVID. So I'm having a little frustrations with not being able to return to work because of these positive tests. And I feel a million times better than I did when I first found out that I had COVID. Um, and I want to talk to you about the symptoms, like the symptoms before I tested positive and all of the symptoms I had since then, just in case you guys are curious. I know that everybody experiences COVID a little bit differently. So if you are trying to figure out if you have COVID, the best way to figure that out is to actually go and take a test. Um, because everybody, like I said, experiences COVID differently. So on April 20th, I was actually at work and I started to feel the first symptom that I actually had was that morning. I had a little bit of a scratchy throat. I didn't think anything of it because in the springtime, I tend to have allergies pretty badly and my asthma tends to flare up. So I didn't really think anything of it. I went to work that morning just like normal. And while I was at work, my symptoms started to develop rapidly. While I was at work, I, first of all, I got really, really hot. Like I had a hot flash, like really bad. And then I got really, really cold. Like I was so cold to the point that I was shivering uncontrollably. I ended up having to sit down because I couldn't stop shivering and I felt like I was going to fall over. So I sat down and I just started feeling really dizzy. And so I had a feeling that something was going on. And I put a mask on before my godmother came to pick me up. She picked me up from work because at that time my car was in storage because I put my car in storage for the winter. So I put a mask on before I got in her truck and I went home. I told her I was not feeling good. I decided to take a COVID test when I got home from work that day, and it ended up that day it was negative. So I thought that I just had like the flu or some sort of bug. And shortly after I got home and took that COVID test, I ended up vomiting. I was very nauseous for that whole first day. I had a hard time staying awake. Like I went and laid down and fell asleep for a few hours. And then I got up to sit on the couch and I could barely stay awake on the couch. I was falling asleep just sitting there. Um, After that day, the next day, I felt a little bit better, but I had a horrible sore throat and I had a bad cough. At this point, I still hadn't had a positive test, so I didn't think that it was COVID. The next day, my boss, which is the pastor at the church that I work for and the church that I attend, she's pastor of both churches, she texted my godmother to let her know that she tested positive for COVID. And this was on a Friday. So my symptoms initially started on Wednesday, and my pastor, my boss, said that she tested positive on that Friday. So because she tested positive, I decided that I should probably take another test just to be safe. And after taking that test, like within a couple minutes of me doing the rapid test, the results were already showing up positive. Like it was a very strong positive. So from then, I notified my doctor. He told me basically just treat the symptoms, which at that time my symptoms were a horrible cough, like a very productive, horrible cough. I still had nausea. I had literally no appetite. Like I was having to force myself to eat just to get like energy into my body. I was drinking tea because my throat felt like I had little knives or broken glass or something in it. Like it felt awful. It felt like, as I was thinking of this a couple days after I tested positive, the pain that I felt in my throat felt like when, after I had gotten my tonsils taken out, like it was that much of a pain. And the cough didn't help things because every time I coughed, it made my throat hurt even worse. So that didn't help at all. But as time went on, I started to get my appetite back a little bit. Like, I don't have my normal appetite back at all. Like, I'm still somewhat having to force myself to eat, but I do have a little bit of an appetite. I never lost my sense of taste or smell. I just had nausea and vomiting for like 2 days, and that was before I even tested positive. So I didn't know that I had COVID at that point. But now that I am still testing positive, the only real symptoms I still have a cough, and that's basically only if I like overdo, ooh, hiccup, if I overdo it, like if I'm doing too much strenuous activity, or like if I'm going for a walk, or if I'm outside, or if I walk up and down the stairs, I get out of breath fairly quickly. I get tired very quickly. Like, I definitely feel like my endurance has gone down the drain because I used to be able to walk, you know, a fairly good distance outside, and now I can't even do like a quarter of that without getting out of breath and just feeling exhausted. Like I said, though, my symptoms could be completely different from your symptoms because everybody experiences COVID differently. And then again, there's also variants. So the different variants have different like prevalent symptoms and things like that. I never really had a headache. I did have body aches for the first few days, like bad, like it felt almost like arthritis pain. And the only reason I know about arthritis pain is because I do have arthritis in my shoulder and in my back and my hip. So it's just, you know, it's very individual experience when it comes to COVID. Thankfully, I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything like that. I was monitoring myself with an oximeter. I have one of those. And I was monitoring my oxygen saturation levels and things like that just to be safe. I never really had a fever. I will tell you that. My boss did and my godmother did, but I never had a fever. Basically, I had the chills. I didn't really have a fever. I had checked my temperature multiple times and it was never a fever. So I don't really know about that either. But I'm thankful that I'm feeling better. I'm thankful that I didn't have to go to the hospital to get treatment or anything like that. I just wish that I could test negative so that I could return to work, because it's really frustrating to not be able to work when basically all the other employees at the church have tested negative, those that tested positive. So it's really frustrating. But if you guys have any other questions about my experience with COVID, feel free to ask. I would be more than happy to share my thoughts and what I've experienced with you guys. I do think it's important to share your story because, like I said, everybody experiences it differently. If you think that you might have COVID, please get tested, because that's really the only way that you can tell if you have COVID or not. And yeah, just be safe. Be careful out there. COVID is still alive, it still exists, and it's still occurring. So just be careful. I know a lot of places are opening back up and doing things like normal. And I just want to say be careful with that, because where I ended up getting COVID was actually a COVID outbreak at the church with our first brunch potluck thingy after Easter church services, and a bunch of people from both congregations ended up testing positive after that. So just be careful and be safe. Wash your hands. If you feel more safe wearing a mask, wear a mask. I will definitely be wearing a mask anywhere I go in public for the foreseeable future. So yeah, anyways, I hope you guys are being safe, and I will talk to you guys next time.